Let's just look into this. Does anyone seriously think Shamima Begum should be allowed back into the UK? I'll explain the reasons behind this. I'm not just, it's not a hang and flog 'em argument at all on this, but let's just go back. December 2014, so it's coming up on 6 years very, very soon. Shamima Begum and her two friends decided that a civilized life in the West was not for them, and we all remember those curious photos of three girls leaving the home territory bound for Syria. Within weeks, they were firmly ensconced in their ISIS dream. The self-radicalized trio had opted for blood and barbarism over Western values, even allowing for their age, by the way, which was 15 at the time. The level of stupidity in the minds of these three teenagers was utterly breathtaking. So off she trotted to live out her new life as a terrorist bride. She got married within 10 days of being there. And we didn't hear too much in the intervening years, but around about February 2019, many journalists began to work out that she was in a different place. And I think it was the Times war correspondent, Anthony Lloyd, who found her in a refugee camp in northern Syria. And it was interesting. This was described as the scoop of the decade, by the way, because people were thinking, is she dead? I think the other two might have got killed along the way. But she'd survived. She'd been pregnant several times. She'd lost babies due to the conditions she was living in. What was interesting is there she was. One would assume sort of desperate to improve her circumstances, but she said in the interview that she wasn't fazed by things like seeing people getting beheaded, because the people getting beheaded were enemies of Islam. She was fine with all of that, absolutely fine. And she repeated that in a few interviews. I think she did a BBC one. I think Sky News chatted to her as well, shortly after giving birth, I think for the third or fourth time. And yeah, this isn't somebody who'd given up any of their thoughts as to why they'd gone. But of course, this prompted the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid to announce that an order had been made with the intention of stripping her of her British citizenship. It was argued that she could rest upon one of her parents' Bangladeshi roots, and therefore claim it becomes a Bangladeshi problem. I'm not sure how that works out legally. But in July 2020, the Court of Appeal, so this is just a few months ago in this country, ruled that she should be permitted to return to the UK so that she could fairly contest the decision by instructing lawyers properly. The ruling is subject to, of course, this current appeal going on in the Supreme Court. This is a girl who knew what Islamic State was. She knew how they functioned. She knew what they did. She knew about torture. She knew about beheadings. She knew about their eventual jihadist aims, and she was fine with all of that. Even as I mentioned, 5 years down the line, she was still fine with all that. She only changed her mind because she was concerned about the health of her children and wanted to find a way of sneaking back in. But beyond that, this is a girl quite happy living as part of a barbaric death cult who believe that their murderous endeavours are directed by an invented God. It's as simple as that. And here is the problem. And we see this time and time again. It's about the only way I can put this is kind of the establishment versus the people, in a way. And I am constantly saying, lawyers off the record will tell you that their public opinion is a component to legal decisions. But I don't think that's ever said explicit. It's not said out loud, but it certainly can be, that you take into account the zeitgeist, the mood, the sensibilities, the optics of a legal decision, etc. And we saw this with Brexit, didn't we? I mean, the famous headline, "Enemies of the People," which caused complete outrage. I didn't think it was a particularly good headline, judges being judges doing what they do. But simultaneously, the idea that it was some kind of akin to some Third Reich propaganda in writing was utterly nonsense. It brushed over me, that particular headline. But there is a point here when you realise that lawyers and often politicians seem to be singing from a very different agenda to everyone else. Now, there's a sort of an argument here that, well, that's why they do what they do for a living and the rest of us don't, because they are the people that can deal with the uncomfortable, the controversial. They can remove sentiment in making decisions. They're able to look objective. All of this kind of stuff. And I get that, and I sort of respect the fact that they're able at times to do that. But I also think that many of these people act or exist within a kind of an establishment bubble, which informs their decision as much as the law does. 0344 499 1000. So when I hear and see that lawyers are carving out a case and arguing and debating, that this isn't, by the way, a trial to decide whether she should come back to live. This is a trial to decide whether or not she could contest the citizenship issue from over there or over here. And the bottom line is, I don't think we care. I don't think we care because we shouldn't care. That is a civilized, progressive approach. That is an intellectual approach. The idea that you have teams of lawyers who are arguing that an ISIS bride, quite relaxed with ISIS values, murder, beheadings, torture, you name it, quite relaxed about the potential onslaught of things that could happen here, quite relaxed about, where do we go, Manchester Arena, London Bridge, Westminster, 7-7, the list goes on. One has to reasonably assume, based on her own words, quite relaxed about that, because they're not values that come under her version of Islam. I don't think she in any way has any right to come back here, and I believe legally that should be a reasonable component to the legal arguments. What is the public opinion on this? What is right? Forget what's written specifically in the minutiae of a legal text. What is right? Because we see this all the time, don't we? We see countless examples of, you open up your newspapers, you discover, somebody got 3 years for killing a child or something, 2.5 months for rape, and you look at this and you think, who? I know I wasn't at the court case on that specific occasion, but who's making these decisions? What are they taking into account? And this is what I mean about the establishment bubble that exists. And politicians do it, and particularly sort of right-wing politicians are guilty of this as well. I think on the legal side, you have a kind of left-wing cartel of legal loons who really believe in this stuff. They almost believe that if their decision is controversial, then by dint of its controversy, it becomes the right decision. Because law is meant to be difficult and challenging. It's not meant to be a comfort blanket. And therefore, if you come to a decision that is controversial and unpopular, that sort of informs your rightness. So when I hear, an ultra-right-wing politician talk about, taking money from poor families, under that kind of similar banner, we have to make uncomfortable decisions. They're almost convinced that the uncomfortableness is a green light to do it. I don't think they're informed by evil. I think that their beliefs, the establishment belief system, is thus that if it looks clunky and awkward and unpopular, that might be the reason to do it. Not just to be controversial, because there's a kind of curious establishment theme woven into the minds of people that going against the consensus or going against the public is kind of right, because that firms up their status as special people. We know something they don't know. The little man is unaware of the detail, but we know. So you might think it's uncomfortable. That's because you don't know or understand. But we do understand, because we know what is right and what is wrong. It's kind of that. That's how I see it. I'm sure a lawyer, and we'll speak to one later in the program on this, will tell me differently. But I kind of sense that have we just about got a legal basis for bringing this girl back? And the lawyers, they comb over this case and they say, look, Article 7, Paragraph 6, Subsection 4 of the 1658 rule on can you bring bad terrorist-loving people back to the UK, it kind of says you might be able to face a trial. And they will take that and expand it and convince themselves it's the right thing to do. Whereas sometimes you just sort of have to look at a situation. If it looks wrong, it sounds wrong, everything about it smells wrong, then it probably is wrong. Is there anyone who sit with a straight face? And by the way, I don't want to rig this as a question so that you only answer in the with sympathy to my view. I'm genuinely all ears, because I cannot for the life of me fathom how somebody who could have cleared off with her mates, completely in the knowledge of what they were doing, and up to the age of, so she was 15 when she went, she's 21 now, and until recently has still been singing the praises of ISIS and what they do. As a 21-year-old girl, you want her back here? The lawyers in this particular case have already said she could be a security threat. And when she comes back here, where will she be? How many people do you have involved in the process of following Shamima Begum as she goes about her business before any potential trial? What would she be charged with? She legged it to join a death cult. There's the headline. That's what you need to know. What are the details? Oh, was she kidnapped? No. Did somebody take her against her will? No. Has she refuted and now refuses to believe what she once believed? No. Has she adopted Western value? Well, you heard it in that clip. Well, there's still some British values. Get out of here. Sorry, you got no right on these shores, mate. None whatsoever. And only a supercharged loon would surely think otherwise. 0344 499 1000. Is there anyone that thinks this girl should be allowed back to the UK? We'll open up the lines on that.